AFR On Demand is brought to you by Breck Golf. Try Beaver Creek today, just 20 minutes from downtown Baton Rouge in the Zachary area. They've got a PGA Tour driving range, a short game practice area, 30 to 40-yard practice shots. It's a great place to chip and putt and practice if you don't have time for a full round. Book your tee time today, golf.breck.org, golf.breck.org.
Matt Moscona.
I'm very important.
After further review.
Say it one more time.
After further review with Matt Moscona.
And here we go.
Live from the Raising Cane studio.
Let's ride!
Hour 3, off we go. Welcome aboard. Glad you're with us. It's AFR, presented by Don Juan Cigar Bar. I'm Matt Musso and Taylor Sharp back in studio. Cassie Spazzali on site. And how about that? How about that service? Dude brought me a beer. Save it for later. Appreciate y'all for hanging out with us here at the Zurich Classic Walk-Ons 10. Thanks to Brandon Landry. Got to see him a bit ago as well here. Great hospitality is always an awesome way to spend part of your Friday, Saturday, or Sunday here at the Zurich Classic. The draft resumes in 1 hour. So right on the nose, 1 hour the draft will resume. The Saints have the 42nd pick. We will dive into a little bit of what we might expect the Saints to do at 42. We'll get to that here in just a smidge. They're on the top of the 5th in Starkville. And so LSU is batting with a 3-run lead, 7-4. LSU leading the Bulldogs, top 5 there in Starkville. I want to pivot just briefly because we didn't get a chance yesterday to do this because we were at the LSU Parade Grounds for the Team Kate Swab event, and the show had just a much deeper meaning for a lot of things yesterday, and so it took a lot of the show, and I was glad to do it, and it was wonderful. But Thursday was the final media availability for LSU for spring football. They're going to practice Saturday, and that'll be the final practice. But Thursday was the last time we got to watch them practice and the last media availability with players. And Winnie Watkins, the receiver transfer from Ole Miss, is one of the players who met with reporters. And I'm glad that he was one that took a turn because I think he's one of the more interesting stories on this team, but also one of the more important players offensively for reasons we've talked about. And if you remember, on Tuesday during our media availability with Lane Kiffin, I asked Lane specifically about Winnie Watkins because one of the things that's been very apparent to me, again, like I don't know the play calls, I don't know the offense, I just get to go watch like the rest of the media. But Winnie Watkins wears 6, which by the way, they're going to have a potential problem if you do end up playing Husan Longstreet at quarterback, because Longstreet and Watkins are both 6, and you can't have 2 6s on the field at the same time. But anyway, I digress. Let's hope Sam Levitt's healthy. We don't have to answer that question. But Watkins always seems to be in the right place. It's just an observation where you go, man, Watkins makes catches all the time. And it's if they need a first down on 3rd and 6, he runs the quick out route, the timing pattern, he knows exactly where to be. And it's just very obvious that his familiarity with this offense is making him more efficient. Like you look and you go, oh, that's how it's supposed to look when this thing is fluid. So even when the offense was scuffling, he was still very efficient throughout this process. So I asked Lane Kiffin on Tuesday about Watkins' familiarity with the offense and how much that helps.
Obviously, when players come from systems no different than the NFL, when they sign them in free agency from the last place they were coaching at, a lot of times usually defensive or offensively when a coordinator moves or becomes a head coach, that really helps. Now, hopefully the other guys, they'll progress a little bit slower and catch up to that, because obviously Winnie has a head start, but it is really good. Part of bringing TJ here was not just the player that he is, it was that he knew my expectations in the locker room, how things are done, especially on the other side of the ball. And so to have that, so when players are asking, like, okay, hey, how can we do this? He can say, hey, you got to trust the process. This is how it works. You're going to eventually figure it out. It just may not make sense now. So when he's younger, but he gives you some of that in the receiver room, that went in a lot to decisions take because they understand what you're trying to get done.
Okay. So with that context from Lane about Winnie, even though he's younger, knows what to do and all that sort of stuff, Watkins talked about this being, remember, he's a sophomore now. Like, he played his freshman season last year at Ole Miss. So it's only his second year, but still, it's his second year in this offense. So this was Watkins talking about the importance of him being in his second year in the offense.
My freshman year, I did a lot of thinking because I knew the offense because I learned it last spring ball. And you know how, like, you do something in life and, okay, you feel like you got it and then you just go with it. Now I'm to the point where, like, I feel like I got the offense. Now I'm getting the advanced stuff. So now I'm learning, like, defenses. I'm learning how to play like a quarterback. So while I'm on the field, I'm reading the defense like a quarterback. So I feel like I'm on that next step now to where it's like I'm trying to take that year two growth that I've been calling. Me and Coach McDonald been talking about year two growth. So I feel like my year two growth is just, playing faster, which I think I have been doing, reading the defenses, understanding the game, and just going out there and playing. Because at the end of the day, football is a pretty basic sport. It's just you got to do your part and understand it to the best of your abilities and then go complete the assignment.
This is going to be a weird comp. I'm sure you view a comp that has nothing to do with sports. When I was in high school, I worked at a seafood market. This is weird. It's always going to be a weird comp. But I think it'll be relatable for anybody. I worked in a seafood market, and people would come in and maybe someone would say, yeah, I'd like a half a pound of headless shrimp. And so you have to weigh it, right? You have to weigh it and then tag it. And you get so good at doing something because you do it so much, you can just tell. And, like, I could just eyeball it, throw it on the scale, and within, like, a half a tenth a pound, I'd nail it. Just because I know I did it all the time, right? So, like, whatever that thing is in your life, maybe you're a carpenter. Like, you can look at a piece of hardwood and know the dimensions or what that's going to be good. You know. But if you think back to, like, your first day doing that thing, or even if you're an attorney or a surgeon or whatever, a radio host, like, doesn't it stand to reason that the more you do something, the better at it you're going to be? That's what this feels like. You're seeing guys in this offense that are learning the offense, and so maybe they're a tick slow because they're still thinking. And so you heard Winnie Watkins say, like, I'm in my year two and it's growth, and so now it's like I'm starting to learn what it's like to play as a defensive back. And it's just very clear that he's advanced, and so it gives you a lot of confidence knowing that the other guys, hopefully, are going to get to that same level. And then what about, like, year two and then year three as well? So I thought that was interesting. And remember, earlier in spring, we also heard from TJ Daugherty, who is one of the other, there's three players that came over from Ole Miss. Devin Harper was the other. But Daugherty talked about Lane Kiffin sort of being a misunderstood guy, about how genuine that he is. Well, Winnie Watkins was asked why he followed Kiffin from Ole Miss to LSU.
I would say being recruited out of high school, Coach Kiffin was already, like, the reason why I wanted to go to Ole Miss. So, I did my visit there. I loved everything there. The offense was great. Offensive staff is really good, and they're like a group of geniuses to me. So, Coach Weiss, all of them, Coach McDonald, they showed me the offense, and I was like, I want to be a part of it. I went to Ole Miss, did my part, because I was a freshman. So I really just tried to find a role, played when I played, got the ball, whatever, did my job. And then as Coach Kiffin got the opportunity to go to LSU and he told me that he was going to go there, I was like, you know what, I'm going to take my talents to there too, because I feel like I put my trust in him coming out of high school. So him going to LSU, I feel like it was just a good move for me.
Really, I've used this term a bunch throughout spring to describe Lane Kiffin, but I've described Lane Kiffin as thoughtful. Again, not like thoughtful and like, that's you're considering the feelings of others, just like you're thinking a lot about what you're saying and the answers you're giving. And I felt the same sort of listening to Winnie Watkins as well. And, one more that I thought was interesting hearing from Winnie was about the team's growth. You heard him talk a little bit about his growth, but the team's growth so far through spring, coming in as a whole lot of new pieces through 15 practices, how much they've developed.
I would say as we keep improving as a team and coming together as a family, we just got to keep growing together, learn each other. We hang out, but we need to hang out more oftenly. As the summer come, I'm pretty sure we will, and just grow together. Like offensively, if we come together and everybody just, understand everybody's role and everybody understand that they got a piece to the puzzle, we're going to do our job, and then defense do their job, and we all come together and we go dominate.
When Lane Kiffin at the beginning of spring was talking about the receiver group. And remember, they went into the portal and they went ham at receiver. They added Jace Brown and Trey Wilson and Jackson Harris and Winnie Watkins and Roman Mothershed and Tyree Holloway and Josh Jackson and Malik Elzy. I mean, that's 9 receivers just out of the portal. That doesn't even include Corey Barber and Jabari Mack. You have Braden Allen, who's still not even here yet. So point being, like, you're going to have, a dozen wide receivers. And the way Lane said it earlier in spring was they could have used their cap, right, their budget, the word he used, their cap, all on like 1 or 2 receivers. But you run the risk if you do that of, like, what if you miss, or what if there's an injury or a turned ankle away from them blowing your entire budget on one player. And the example to give, obviously, is Corey Coleman, the Auburn receiver, who's was outstanding. I mean, he's an outstanding receiver, he's the best receiver in the portal. He's at Texas now. But instead of going that route, they went the route of adding 9 guys, all in different classifications with different experience levels and different skill sets. And the idea was, okay, well, now we have this deep room of a lot of talented people. Of these dozen, these 12, 13, 14 receivers, if you include the freshmen, what 4 to 6 can emerge? Well, I think throughout spring we've seen Jackson Harris, Jace Brown. I mentioned, obviously, Winnie Watkins. And then I think guys like Malik Elzy, certainly one of those, who's been impressive. And a guy that stood out to me a bunch is Trey Wilson, the Florida transfer, who is just sudden and explosive. He's smaller. He's 5'11", 190 is where they have him listed, but he is fast and explosive and an exciting athlete to watch. But I guess my point with all of this is to say, listening to Winnie Watkins talk about his progression year 1 to year 2 in this offense is a good roadmap to see about how everybody else in this offense might progress throughout spring and then in the summer, fall, and then throughout the season and then as it goes along, which sounds obvious, but it's an example of actually an illustrative example of seeing it progress here throughout spring compared to other guys who are learning it for the first time. So for that reason, I think Winnie Watkins has been a really valuable piece for this team so far, and hopefully will be in the 2026 season as well. All right, it's After Further Review. We are glad you're hanging out with us here on this Friday edition of AFR, presented by Don Juan Cigar Bar. I always love telling you about Arco Power Systems, ARCCO, Arco.com. It's Arco Power Systems. Our friends over at Arco tell you all the time about what they do at Arco. They are industrial generator power. That's what they do at Arco. It's standby generators for your business, for your industrial facility, for your municipality. It's Arco Power Systems, ARCCO. And while home base is in Baton Rouge, they serve so much more than just Baton Rouge at Arco Power Systems. You go north to Little Rock, east to Mobile, west to San Antonio, draw a giant circle. If you're anywhere in that footprint, Arco can help your business stay online when the power goes out. ARCCO, Arco.com, Arco.com, Arco.com. All right, y'all, it is After Further Review on this Friday edition of AFR. As we mentioned, the LSU Tigers are out there in Starkville, game 1 against the Mississippi State Bulldogs. They're bottom 5 right now. It is 7-5 LSU as Mississippi State has added a run. They tacked on one here in the 5th. So LSU's hanging on, and we'll see if this team can, Sullivan homered. So the long ball has dinged LSU at times in this game. Again, I'm trying to follow it. I'm trying to host the show and follow the game on my phone as best I can. But Tigers still lead 7-5. Devin Sheeran is on the mound for LSU. I'm certain the thought here from Jay Johnson is let Sheeran get you home. I mean, last week against Texas A&M, he went 4 1/3 in relief, and he's your best arm in the bullpen. And so if Devin Sheeran can get you home in this game, fantastic, or get you to a point where you can hand the ball to Zach Cowan and maybe they can get you home. LSU needs wins. They need wins however they may come. So if you have an opportunity with a lead on the road against Mississippi State to get a win against a ranked team and a real nice RPI opportunity, you throw everything at it, and that's clearly what they're doing right now. All right, it's After Further Review. Let's knock out a quick break. NFL Draft resumes in 46 minutes from right now. We'll get you caught up on all the Day 2 rumors and what the Saints and Tigers. Saints may be looking at what the Tigers might hear their name called today. We'll dive into that here as we continue. Stay with us here on a Friday edition of AFR presented by Don Juan Cigar Bar. We're live at the Zurich Classic.
After Further Review.
If you want to feel your best, our friends at Goodwood Men's Sexual Wellness can help. yourgoodwood.com, yourgoodwood.com. That's the website. You can check them out online, yourgoodwood.com. Just a minute, actually not long ago, there was a younger guy who popped over here, 34 years old, and actually told me the story that he had just started on hormone therapy. I don't know how I ended up in those conversations with people sometimes, but we did. Maybe it was complimenting my weight loss, just looking better, and he mentioned to me he started HRT, and I was like, "You're going to love it." And my story is one that's not dissimilar from a lot of men. Went through a very stressful life experience with my son in the hospital. It aged me physically, and hormone replacement therapies helped get my levels back to health, get me back to healthy levels. So I feel like I did when I was younger, perform better in every way, mentally, cognitively, physically, everything. yourgoodwood.com. Check them out. yourgoodwood.com.
After Further Review with Matt Moscona, presented by Don Juan Cigar Bar.
All right, Devin Sheeran got the Tigers off the field in the fifth. They maintain their lead 7-5 in Game 1 there in Starkville. Tigers and Bulldogs. Day 2 of the NFL Draft resumes here in less than an hour, and it's going to be fascinating to see what happens at the top. So Jordan Schultz had a report earlier on Friday that the 49ers, Cardinals, and Bills have received calls about potential trades at the top of round 2. Look, 5 of the final 7 picks in round 1 were offensive linemen, as we know. So typically when there's a run on a position, if there's a team that needs that position, then you're sometimes forced to act if there's a player you want before they come off the board. Schultz followed with another report that the 49ers are considered, quote, very open to moving back, acquiring draft capital at number 33. So 33 is the first pick of day 2. And I've told this before, but remember the Saints did this a few years back when they drafted Nick Saldiveri, when they went and took him with the first pick of day 3 of the draft. So you have time from the end of the day to the resumption of the draft to try to broker a deal, as opposed to just like the 8 minutes between draft picks, which is a very condensed timeline to get something done. You have time now to make it happen. So for whatever it's worth, there was I believe it was Pelissero. Pelissero said this among the teams, and you'll hear one that's familiar, among the teams potentially looking up to trade up on day 2.
Among other teams that are calling around not just the 33, but for other picks at the top of round 2 include the Dolphins, the Saints have made calls, the Browns, and the Jaguars, who of course did not have a pick on night 1. That had a product of the Travis Hunter deal a year ago. Keep an eye on those teams.
Now, Pelissero followed that up with who teams might be looking to move up for.
In terms of who they potentially could be trading up for, let's start with a couple of guys who were the last men in the green room last night. Caden McDonald, the Ohio State defensive tackle. Not a lot of defensive tackle movement in round 1. We did see a couple come off the board, but certainly Caden McDonald is somebody that is viewed within the league as a player likely to come off in the first, let's say, 5 to 10 picks of round 2. Colton Hood, the Tennessee cornerback, also in the green room last night. That was maybe the most surprising player that did not come off the board in round 1. Again, a position where there just weren't very many corners that came off the board. Hood is a potential target as high as number 33. His college teammate Jermad McCoy, a top 10 talent who did not go in round 1 because of concerns about his knee. People within the league, executives I've spoken to, do anticipate we hear McCoy's name called at some point today. Denzel Boston, Washington wide receiver, another potential move up target.
So Denzel Boston, I think, would be off the board for New Orleans, considering they used the 8th overall pick on a wide receiver. So if New Orleans did move up, it would stand to reason they'd be going defense if they moved up. And you'd probably be looking at cornerback or edge rusher. So Jermad McCoy, I think, is probably the most intriguing name there. Again, because you're talking about a guy who is potentially, but for his injury, would have been potentially the top cornerback in this draft. So didn't play this season because of the ACL. So McCoy is if they're okay with with the injury situation, that could be a target there. Colton Hood from Tennessee also as well. And then Brandon Cisse, the cornerback from South Carolina, and Avion Terrell, who before this draft had a lot of love and draft projection as a potential first-round draft pick who's still on the board. So, do the Saints get aggressive to try to move up to the top of round 2 to get the guy at a defensive position need they absolutely want, or are they patient? Because I just rattled off 4 names there. And it's unlikely that all 4 corners are going to come off the board in the first 10 picks of round 2. The Saints also need edge rushers. Now, Matt Miller from ESPN.com has a day 2 mock draft. He mocks every pick for rounds 2 and 3, and he's got the Saints at 42 taking Cassius Howell, the edge from Texas A&M. Now, if you're able to take Cassius Howell at 42, who had 11.5 sacks this last year at Texas A&M, then I'd be over the moon. I mean, because then you would have gotten your elite level receiver in the first round, and now you would have gotten a premium athletic edge rusher at 42 overall without having to give up draft capital. And now you can sit and wait and to see what's there for you at the end of round 3, or what Ross Jackson suggested to us earlier today could be in play. Remember, the Saints have 2 fourth-round picks and 2 fifth-round picks. So there's nothing maybe to preclude this team from packaging the extra picks they have in day 3 to potentially move up in round 3 or back into round 2 to get a player they want. So there's no reason, as you sort of map it all out, why the Saints couldn't come out of today with both an edge rusher and a cornerback, trading up potentially to get 2 second-round picks. They're number 42, and then potentially trading up somewhere else in round 2 to get a player that they want to make sure they leave the first 2 days with 3 players, receiver, edge rusher, corner, that are arguably their 3 biggest positions of need, all addressed with players they want. So for me, I think that would be a very appealing path for New Orleans. When this whole thing started, we looked at round 1 and the 8th pick and said they really could go 2 ways. You could get the elite level receiver and then draft corner in round 2, or you could go with the best defensive player available and make sure you got a receiver at number 42. Well, they're no longer going to be in the mix for a receiver at 42. And the names that are out there, Jeremy Bernard and some of the other receivers that are on the board that could be there at the top of round 2 after you had a little bit of a run. The Denzel Boston, who we mentioned, those aren't going to be necessarily options you wouldn't think for the Saints at 42. Maybe later in the draft you could take a flyer on a receiver, but best player available at 42, or move up if there's a player that you absolutely want to get at a position to be corner edge would make a lot of sense for New Orleans here today. I do want to talk about the LSU guys that are likely to hear their name called today, and one of them got a little bit of a curveball thrown a day ago. We'll get to that. We are brought to you by Our Lady of the Lake, championship health partner of LSU Athletics. Our Lady of the Lake and LSU, together we roar. You can always learn more at ololrmc.com/LSU, ololrmc.com/LSU for Our Lady of the Lake. They take care of the champions on the field and everyday champions in our communities. FMOL Health, Our Lady of the Lake, and LSU. Together, we roar. So the LSU Tigers, speaking of, 2 players likely to hear their names called today, or I should say possibly to hear their name called today. A.J. Halsey, the safety transfer from the University of Houston, spent 1 season in Baton Rouge. He is on this Matt Miller mock draft as the 49th pick to the Minnesota Vikings. So they have him as a mid-second round pick, going 49 overall. And he wrote, "We were all stunned the Vikings didn't select a safety in round 1 after virtually every mock draft since February predicting one of them." Notes in Halsey, Minnesota would get a strong safety with 215 pounds of power, also playmaking ability that saw him pick off 10 passes in college. I love A.J. Halsey. I think he is a prospect that you would describe as a high floor, lower ceiling prospect. Like, I don't think 10 years from now you look back at A.J. Halsey and he's a perennial all-pro. He's not Caleb Downs or Kyle Hamilton or one of the best elite safeties in the NFL, but he's a guy who almost certainly is not going to be a bust. Like, he's got a very high floor. He's going to be a starting caliber player in the NFL at strong safety who can also help you on special teams. So that feels like a very safe pick for any team that needs safety help. So Halsey at 49 of the Vikings. And then a few picks later, they project Garrett Nussmeier, number 53 overall, to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, The biggest surprise of round one, as people have talked about, is what happened with the Rams taking Ty Simpson 13 overall. As a matter of fact, Sean McVay, there was a lot of video that surfaced where McVay kind of looked dismayed at the pick. And he was asked, did they tell Stafford about the pick? Here was McVay first about that.
Yeah, I did. I'll keep that between us. We'll see. He's going to compete with Stetson.
With Stetson. Remember, Stetson Bennett's still on the team. But then here was McVay ensuring everyone still that this is Matthew Stafford's team. No kidding.
Let's make one thing clear. This is Matthew's team. And you get a chance to be able to address, the backup quarterback. We've got Stetson. We've talked about the importance of Jimmy. So to be able to add somebody that you can evaluate a body of work where he was asked to play the position and a lot of things that do translate in terms of concepts, reading with his feet, some of the different things in the drop back in the play action game, the movement game. So there's a lot of things that Coach Grubb did that's very similar to kind of how we operate. So it made it an easier evaluation to be able to kind of say, all right, what would that look like if you did translate it to our level?
I think that is a brutal pick. And it's not necessarily because I think Ty Simpson's a bad player or will never amount to anything in the NFL. He certainly could. It's a brutal pick because Matthew Stafford is the reigning NFL MVP. You have the reigning NFL MVP on your team. You have the 13th pick of the draft. Select a player that's going to help the 37-year-old reigning MVP try to win another championship. Ty Simpson does not help you win another championship this year. You can always address quarterback in the future. It goes to show where we started the show today, where we were talking about risk-reward, right? Risk tolerance. And Mickey Loomis has a high risk tolerance. This is a really gutless pick by the Rams because you effectively said, yeah, we're thinking about the future, not the now, even though we have the reigning MVP. I mean, the Saints spent a decade in ultra win now mode with Drew Brees. And you can say what you want because it didn't work. Like they didn't get to a Super Bowl and win another one. They got really close. They had some awful playoff luck and some of the worst playoff losses ever. But they were going for it. And I can certainly respect that. I mean, if you're not playing to win a championship, what are you doing? And the Rams have the hardest piece of the puzzle figured out with Matthew Stafford having the NFL MVP quarterback. Build around your quarterback. Don't go get a backup quarterback who might play for you in a few years. Anyway, but we had talked a lot pre-draft about Garrett Nussmeier being a potential day two fit to the Rams, which would have made an awful lot of sense. The Rams could have gotten whatever they needed at the top of round one, and then they could have used a day two pick on Garrett Nussmeier, and that'd be a great fit in that offense. Well, now they've taken Ty Simpson, so that's off the board. I would actually argue the next best opportunity for Garrett Nussmeier would be the Steelers. Stable organization, a veteran head coach, won a Super Bowl, is familiar with his dad, Doug Nussmeier. And so you don't know what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers. My assumption is Rodgers will be back for at least another year. That would give, if Nussmeier went to the Steelers, him the opportunity to effectively take a redshirt year, wouldn't have to be thrust into things early. He could sit and watch and develop and grow. I mean, just sitting the first 9 games of the season or 8 games of the season seemed to help Tyler Shuck throughout the back half of the year. So I like it a lot if it were to come to pass that Nussmeier would go to Pittsburgh. And it wouldn't be the path that necessarily he thought or a lot of us thought when the season started, when he was a projected first-round pick. But that would be a really good landing spot if it were to play out that way. All right, y'all, it is After Further Review. Thanks for hanging out with us here on this Friday edition of AFR presented by Don Juan Cigar Bar. The Tigers are over in Starkville. They're in the middle of the 6th inning now. It's still 7-5 with LSU hanging on. Devin Sheeran will go back out there and try to get LSU as close to home as possible. Hunt Palmer is there covering the series for LouisianaSports.net. He is suggesting that it may rain in Starkville. This is just in our LouisianaSports.net group chat. So I think it's why they moved the game up to 3 o'clock, obviously. It was because of the threat of weather tonight in Starkville, but you're kind of hoping that game would get in, and you'd hate to burn Devin Sheeran and not get him across the finish line. But depending on how that weather looks, it may not get there, at least not in the immediacy. So right now, LSU is leading 7-5. They're in the middle of the 6th with the Tigers and the Bulldogs in Starkville. Okay, let me knock out a quick break, and we'll continue. Stay with us. It's AFR.
After further review.
We're brought to you by Glow Resources, glowresources.com. They are complete employer solutions. If you need to hire, you need Glow Resources. glowresources.com, glowresources.com. And you might be saying, well, hire what? Hire anything. They could certainly help you find skilled blue-collar labor. That's their specialty. But maybe you need their professional placement division, which is any type of office job, from the office assistant up to the C-suite. If you're having trouble finding those permanent solutions, not temp staffing, there's not temp labor, these are permanent solutions. If you're having trouble finding those permanent solutions, let Glow Resources help. They conduct some 50 interviews a day. That's roughly 15,000 interviews over the course of a year. They're experts at knowing the right questions to ask to find the right people for your job that will last. Start online today at glowresources.com. G-L-O, glowresources.com.
After further review with Matt Moscona, presented by Don Juan Cigar Bar.
All right, we continue here. Hour 3, a couple of segments to go. If you are so inclined, shoot me an email, tweet, text. What you would like to see the Saints do at 42? I was watching the draft last night, and when Carnell Tate went off the board at 4, I tweeted, "All right, Saints fans, who do you want, Delane or Tyson?" And my mentions get flooded with people like, "Oh, the Chiefs traded up. They're taking Mansour Delane." And I get it. That's fine. If you want to be that guy, you could be that guy. But I still think it's sometimes in life, living in the moment is worth doing, and having the genuine feeling of surprise. And I don't mean to be like the old guy shouting at the clouds, but that felt like a very, it felt very try-hard from all the people who were so quick to comment on Twitter that trade had already been made. I don't care that you're following ahead on the draft books or you follow whoever's tweeting that. I like to watch the draft and hear the announcement and the genuine reaction that comes along with it. Maybe I'm just on an island by myself. I kind of feel like that right now because there's water right there, a little bit of a landmass. There's nobody else up here right now because the tournament's ended and they kicked everybody out. But nonetheless, I'm going to watch the draft, and I'm probably just not going to be on Twitter at all this weekend because I don't want all your spoilers. So I'm going to enjoy the draft, and I would encourage you to do the exact same thing. Saints took Jordan Tyson, as we know, with the 8th overall pick. Both Jordan Tyson and Kellen Moore met with reporters afterwards. And Kellen Moore actually finished up his press conference by talking about how much he likes day 2 of the draft.
This is the fun part. Yeah, the first day you get one pick. It's very exciting, but then we get and sit there and watch all these things happen. And so, we're continuing to build. We got a number of acquisitions to make over the next couple of days, and this is about building a team, and this will be a lot of fun.
So I mentioned that Matt Miller over at ESPN has his mock draft for day 2, so rounds 2 and 3. And we talked about the LSU guys a bit ago. Now, he has the Saints making both of their picks, and at 42, he has him taking the edge rusher, Cassius Howell from Texas A&M. And then with the third-round pick, which is number 73 overall, he's got the Saints going defense again with Kyle Lewis, a linebacker from Pitt. He's 6'1", 220. He's out of New Jersey. Had 43 tackles this past season, 3 sacks, and that would obviously be a replacement for Demario Davis, given you just watched Demario Davis walk in free agency, which is devastating to me. And while there's part of me that is a little excited to see what Danny Stutzman can do, a guy who you drafted a year ago out of Oklahoma and earned more reps as his rookie season went along, earned more snaps. I'm still completely devastated that Demario Davis isn't a member of the Saints anymore for all the reasons we've talked about ad nauseum, but you do still need linebacker depth. So we have spent a good bit of time talking about what the Saints need in this draft. And we focused so heavily on receiver, corner, edge that where they find depth in days 2 and 3, I think will also be interesting, because the two other positions, I would say, if you're putting them in tiers, the top tier or like musts are the ones we just mentioned. Like you had to get a receiver and you have to get a corner because you saw Lante Taylor walk. Like, you have to replace bodies there. And then, next I would say edge rusher, because very likely Cam Jordan's going to go. But I would also say that next tier is linebacker replacing Demario Davis, and very likely an interior offensive lineman, and also a running back, if in fact you plan on replacing Alvin Kamara. Because remember, they restructured Alvin Kamara's contract this offseason with a very clear eye on him not being on the team post-June 1. So that still remains a very real possibility if the Saints are able to go find a running back somewhere in the draft. So, yes, I think linebacker, interior offensive line, and running back would be the other 3 positions that I'm keeping an eye on. Now, Ross Jackson mentioned tight end, and I do understand that because Foster Moreau is no longer on the team, and it's very unlikely that Taysom Hill is back, although I would throw an asterisk around Taysom anyway because he wasn't your prototypical tight end. You do still have Juwan Johnson, who's your second leading receiver a year ago, but if you want a more prototypical tight end, you could potentially seek that as well here in the remainder of the draft. So just a few things to keep an eye on here as the draft resumes. But I think the biggest storyline with the resumption of the draft is going to be, do we see the teams that many thought could go after a quarterback? Arizona, Pittsburgh. Did they go quarterbacks at the top of round 2? Do you see movement at the top of round 2? Carson Beck has been rumored. Could Garrett Nussmeier jump up as well? Those are very real conversations at the top of round 2. The potential trades at the top of round 2 as the draft resumes here shortly will be a real conversation as well. So those are the things that we'll be keeping an eye on here as day 2 of the draft will move through. So Saints have 2 picks scheduled here for day 2 of the draft, 1 in round 2, 1 in round 3. And then they will have 5 picks for day 3 of the NFL draft. But I would make the assumption, as we've talked about a good bit, that New Orleans is very likely, and we know Mickey Loomis's history, but they're very likely to package picks and move up at some point in this draft. I just don't know that as I look at this roster, if they have a need to draft 8 players after drafting 9 last year, because you don't have that many roster spots. And the thought would be, why use the draft capital to select 8 players knowing it's unlikely those 8 players are going to make your team, when you could maybe package picks, select 5 players that you have a high grade on that are all very likely to make the team and be impact guys. That feels like a better probability of success for this draft. Now, a year ago, the Saints made all 9 picks and, they needed everything. So it's a little bit of a moving target, but a different field this year as opposed to a year ago. All right, y'all, it's after further review. We got one segment to go here from Zurich, And as we're down the stretch. So hit me up with what you'd like to see the Saints do. Email me, tweet me, text me. You can text 225-396-4400, 396-4400, 396-4400. Lots of ways that you get involved in the show. We'll also get one final check-in before we bounce out of here on LSU and Mississippi State over in Starkville. As at last check, the Tigers were leading 7-5, but weather was moving on into the area there in Starkville. Devin Sheeran was on the mound for the Tigers. So hopefully the Tigers are able to get this one across the finish line, even if it's delayed here. But a good start for the Tigers so far, up 7-5 right now. As a matter of fact, hang on, I'll refresh. Doesn't want to cooperate. All right, we'll get an update on it. It's after further review. We'll come back and wrap up the show next from the Zurich Classic.
AFR.
Today's show is brought to you by Gordon McKernan Injury Attorneys. Get Gordon and get it done. Go to getgordon.com, getgordon.com. Hey, remember, you got a few days left here. It's the 24th, so you got right at a week left to enter for the Gordon's Grads laptop giveaway. So every year around high school graduation time, Gordon gives away 15 laptops or MacBooks to graduating Louisiana high school seniors that are going to either 2 or 4 year college or trade school. So if that's you or someone in your family, maybe a son, daughter, niece, nephew, grandson, granddaughter, neighbor, if you know a graduating Louisiana high school senior, you want to help them get that leg up as they move on into the next phase of life, Gordon wants to help them do it. And all you got to do is go to gordonsgrads.com to get all the info on how you can enter. gordonsgrads.com. gordonsgrads.com. Get Gordon and get it done.
After further review with Matt Moscona, presented by Don Juan Cigar Bar.
Down the stretch we come, final segment here on a Friday edition of AFR, presented by Don Juan Cigar Bar. Been a great day here from the walk-ons tent, 17 green at the Zurich Classic. TPC of Louisiana down here in Avondale on the West Bank. Just beautiful weather, an awesome day. So much fun to be down here every year on this day. So thanks for hanging out with us on this Friday, and highly encourage you, man, if you have an opportunity, get down here with your family. It's great for a couple's day. It's great for for dads and sons, or moms and daughters, or dads and daughters, or couples, or a guy's trip, or whatever. Clients, there's something for everyone here. So get on down to the Zurich this weekend if you've never been, or if it's been a while since you've been. Make it a plan to get down here. Mississippi State has tied the game against LSU. They're tied at 7 now in the bottom of the 6th. Sheeran's still in the ball game. There's 2 on and 2 out. And it's just a bummer if LSU isn't able to get this one across the finish line, at one point having a 4-run lead. But Tomas Valinkis lasted only 3 2/3. His previous shortest outing was 5 1/3 against Hofstra in the opener and against Virginia Tech in week 3. And those were really just like, he didn't allow a run against Hofstra, and he allowed 2 against Virginia Tech in that 5 1/3, just early in the season when it was still cold. You look at his SEC outings: 7 innings against Arkansas, 7 against Vanderbilt, 5 against Ole Miss, where it was 5 scoreless. Went 7 1/3 against Georgia, 6 innings against Tennessee, and then 6 2/3 against South Carolina. So this is by far the shortest outing that he's had in SEC play. So, LSU on a day where they were whole staffing it after Casey Evans was a late scratch, to get Valinkis out of the game early, and to not be able to hang on after having the early lead is disappointing. So it's not over again, but it is tied now. So they're brand new, knotted up at 7. It's going to be up to the LSU bullpen to throw up a few zeros, and for the offense to really get going as well. You look at the box score in this game, LSU just hasn't been able to throw up clean innings. So they threw up a 0 in the second. I'm looking for the box score, sorry. They threw up a 0 in the second, but other than that, State scored 2 in the first, 1 in the third, 1 in the fourth, 1 in the fifth, now 2 in the sixth. So the inability throw up a 0 is just put LSU in a tough spot. Tigers have put up a few crooked numbers, 2 threes out there, and a solo homer from Cerna in the third. That's how LSU's got to 7. So 7 runs on 10 hits for the Tigers, 7 runs on 7 hits for Mississippi State, 3 errors for the Bulldogs, 1 for LSU. So hopefully the Tigers can get going offensively and find a few more outs and finish that game. Draft is about to resume. One other thing we haven't talked about, obviously, is we've talked about day 2 with the very likely possibility of the likelihood of Nussmeier and A.J. Halsey hearing their name called here on day 2 of the draft. Is the other LSU Tigers who might very well be picked. And it's going to be, I think, an interesting weekend to see how NFL teams value these LSU players because, like, for example, I think the receivers for me are the most interesting because you have 4 guys that could all be drafted. Xavier Thomas, Berrien Brown, Aaron Anderson, and Chris Hilton. And, Chris Hilton could certainly be drafted because by the time you get to the end of day 3, teams pick on, a lot of times, on potential and a guy that they maybe like, but they don't necessarily think that player may pick them as an undrafted free agent because as a UDFA, the player gets to pick their team. They're a free agent. Well, if a team likes Chris Hilton and likes his skill set and his speed and his leadership and his ability to play special teams, maybe you take – I remember James Wright from LSU. James Wright was a 7th-round pick, didn't catch a pass in his final season at LSU, so that can happen. So Xavier, Berrien Brown, Aaron Anderson, Chris Hilton. Then you look at a lot of the defensive players, which are really interesting to me as well, like Jack Pyburn and Patrick Payton, West Weeks, and Bernard Gooden, guys that haven't really gotten a lot of conversation but have gone through the pre-draft process and did really well at Pro Day. It could be a similar thing like a late day 3 flyer on some of these players to see how that may go. And then, longer shots with Josh Thompson and Bauer Sharp, transfers who came in, played a year at LSU and played a lot of college football, but most likely the UDFA route. But pulling for all those guys, all the former Tigers that are hoping to hear their names called, and if it's not, it's just the start of their journey is going to be through free agency and not the draft, and we wish them all the very best. So NFL draft is going to resume here in about 5 minutes, and the Saints will be on the clock with pick 42 overall, the 10th pick of day 2. All right, y'all, that's going to do it for us here on this Friday edition of AFR, presented by Don Juan Cigar Bar, live from the Zurich Classic. A big thanks to Cassie on site for coming down here and getting us all set up and rolling all day. Muse and Taylor back in studio. Appreciate you guys very much as well for all the hard work. Have an awesome weekend. Let's hope LSU can go get a series win there in Starkville against Mississippi State. And we'll be back Monday talking about it on a Monday edition of AFR. We'll see you then.
AFR.
As we get on down the road, we remind you about the Williamson Eye Center. Call 924-2020, 924-2020. You want to see 2020? Call 924-2020. Dr. Blake Williamson and his staff do an awesome job. No matter what your age or refractive issue is, Dr. Blake Williamson has a solution for you. It just takes, for so many of us, the push, that urging, that confidence to make that initial call. And I say it every day when I get to talk about the Williamson Eye Center because I can speak about it passionately because I was that guy for so long. I was a guy who started wearing glasses in the 6th grade, contacts in the 8th grade, had them forever. Did the stupid thing where I'd sleep in my contacts so the lazy didn't want to take them out. And they'd just meld to your eye. It was just, finally I got to the point where I went and saw Dr. Blake Williamson and he gave me so much comfort in the process and I could not be happier. Change your life. WilliamsonEye.com.